our body as a whole must be able to respond, okay, to the changes. Are we together? That occur within our bodies. And so I made a summary of some of the signaling molecules, signaling chemical signals, or signaling pathways that occur within our bodies. So if you have a pen, you can note this down. And the first one is the Otocrine Signals. Otocrine Signals. Now from auto, it means self. Okay? Auto means self. So now these signals, they are produced by the cells, and they have their effect on those very cells that produce them. Okay? Produced by a cell, and they have their effect on the very cells that produce them. And an example that I was able to spot out is the interleukin 2. Okay? Now this is a cytokine. It is a chemical that is produced by the T cells. Okay? And an example is the T killer cells. Now, when you produce this interleukin, you as a T cell, it has an effect that it will increase, it will activate the T cells that have produced this interleukin, and it will also stimulate these T cells to undergo proliferation. Proliferation means undergoing very many divisions, repetitive mitotic divisions, to produce the very cells, similar cells, and very many of them. Why are you producing very many cells? Because you want to respond to a pathogen. You want to respond to a foreign body. So you produce very many cells to activate the response that is going to be given towards that foreign body. Is that okay? Yes. So this interleukin, therefore, is an example of an autocrine signal produced by a cell, okay? But it has an effect on that very cell that has produced it. Another class of chemical signals are the paracrine signals. Now this one, it is produced by a cell. Let's say you have a cell. This is cell A, okay? Cell A. It is going to produce a given chemical, but this chemical that is produced by cell A, it has an effect on cell B. It will diffuse via the adjacent, maybe, should I say desmosomes? Yes. From this, no, they are the gap junctions, not desmosomes. That is if the epithelial cells. So they will diffuse through the gap junctions from cell A to cell B. Okay? And depending on the reason why that cell has been produced, it will bring about that reason. For example, let's say this cell B has misbehaved. Maybe it has turned out into a cancerous cell. Then this cell A will produce a histamine that will diffuse through this gap junction to cell B to induce this cell B to undergo what we call autophagy. Okay? Programmed cell death. So this cell, it will undergo, it will destruct itself and it dies. Now because it has been produced by this cell and it is having an impact on this neighboring cell, then we shall call that one a paracrine signal, produced by a cell, but it affects cells within that vicinity, that locality. So even the insulin hormone and the glucagon and this somatostatin hormone. Now, you cannot produce insulin and glucagon at the same time because these two have antagonistic effects. Okay? So when you produce insulin hormone, then you inhibit the alpha cells to produce glucagon hormone. Similarly, when you produce glucagon hormone, then you inhibit the beta cells from producing the insulin hormone. So because of that effect, they are in the same vicinity, same locality. Then we refer to it as paracrine signaling, or they are paracrine signals. Then another class, we have the endocrine signals. Now this one is the most common one. This one, it is common to your ears. That here, the chemical is produced by one cell, maybe cell A, and this chemical, it will diffuse, or it will be released out of this cell A by exocytosis into the bloodstream or any other circulatory fluid, okay? And now it will saturate in this fluid to cell B. Maybe cell B is somewhere here, very far, okay? And it will have the effect in this distant cell. So this type of signaling, or this type of signaling pathway, we call it the endocrine signaling, or the endocrine pathway. For example, most of these hormones that are common, they fall under endocrine. Now, and even when we are studying, we dwell on this endocrine system. Why endocrine system? Because it is the one that is known most. Okay? It is the one that has been studied. Little is known as far as paracrine signaling and autocrine signaling are concerned. Okay? So that's why we dwell more on the endocrine signaling. Then another class of signaling, it is the neurosignals. Now, these ones, they are produced by the neurons and they impact the very neurons that produce them. They have their effect on those neurons. In other words, they also occur, they also work in that vicinity. Okay? And they bring about that response in the very cells that produce them. And an example is we have neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine. Okay? ACTH. Acetylcholine. Now this one, I once talked about it, but we shall find it, we shall see its impact when we talk about nervous transmission across a synapse. That this neurotransmitter, when a synapse reaches, maybe, let me just do a summary. This is the presynaptic knob. Sorry for that, but it's just a sketch so that we save some time. Then this is the presynaptic knob, and then this is the synaptic cleft. So when an impulse arrives, okay, it will stimulate, it will open these calcium gated channels within the presynaptic knob. Okay, and so when you open these gated channels, then there will be an influx of calcium ions into the presynaptic knob. Is that okay? And so when calcium ions fill up this presynaptic knob, then the increase in concentration of calcium ions, it will stimulate these vesicles. Now these vesicles, they are the ones that do contain this neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, to move towards the presynaptic membrane. So they move down the presynaptic membrane. And so when they reach there, they fuse with this membrane and release their neurotransmitter substance, which is acetylcholine, by exocytosis. Okay? And so the neurotransmitter is released into this synaptic cleft, this space, by exocytosis. Okay? And so when you feed up this space with acetylcholine, then this acetylcholine will come and bind to the receptor molecules in the postsynaptic membrane. You have the receptor proteins in the postsynaptic membrane. So they will bind with this acetylcholine. Now binding of this acetylcholine, okay, to these receptors, it opens the sodium gated channels Okay, with the sodium gated channels within this membrane. And so when you open the sodium gated channels, then there will be an influx of sodium ions into the synaptic knob, okay, and the outflux of potassium ions. And so when the sodium ions enter inside, then the inside of this knob is going to gain a positive charge and the outside becomes negative. And so that difference in the charges creates a wave of depolarization, and this membrane is said to be depolarized, okay, and the action potential continues, is able to be transmitted from this knob to that knob, and it continues. So we shall talk about this in details when we are studying the nervous impulse, the nervous system, and how an action potential is evoked, how it is transmitted along a neuron or an axon, and how it's transmitted along the synapse. So that is basically how neurosignals work. Then the final category of these chemical signals are the neuroendocrine signals. Now these ones, they are the intermediates between the neuro and the endocrine signals, that they are produced by the neurons in the hypothalamus, but they are, instead of now being transported along the axons, along the nervous system, it is transported within blood to the target organs. Okay? So they are released by the neurons, but they are transported in blood and they affect the distant target cells. And an example is ADH. This one is a neurohormone that is secreted by the hypothalamus, by the secretory cells, the neurosecretory cells in the hypothalamus, okay, and then it is released into the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and finally released into blood, and it saturates to the kidney nephron, where it increases the permeability of water, and finally water is absorbed. So basically this is how we classify these chemical signals, and more are there, so you can do research and find out more signals, okay, more signals. And so these are the signals that do interact in your body to bring about that